I've got a question back for you. How do you think Belgium's going to do as the next? Because you were from Belgium, you said, didn't you?
No, Brazil.
Brazil. Okay. And I won't ask you about Belgium.
Belgium is the next.
Belgium is the next EU presidency. They're sort of in this big constitutional conflict, which is sucking up all of their attention. And they have elections, I think, this Sunday. And they're taking over the EU presidency as of the 1st of July. So I hope they get their domestic house in order so they can focus on the international stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. And I think it's already difficult for EU in the negotiations now, because we didn't move for 2 years now since president. And we always have the same target. We don't move on LULUCF. We don't know what we are doing, and I'm French, so European as well. It's really, really difficult, and I would like to see a European Union more ambitious in this process, and it's really difficult. And unfortunately, if they don't move, and I really hope that EU could be a leader in this process, but now I'm not sure that the EU could be a process. And do you think that China, because we just learned 1 hour ago that China is going to host the next conference, that China could be a leader in this process of negotiations?
The unexpected hardball.
No, not at all. Well, first of all, I would disagree with you. I think that the EU is showing leadership. I think that the EU is showing leadership through the -20, -30. I understand that there's some difficulty in making the shift. I think that the EU is more credible than most in terms of the financial support that it's willing to provide. And I saw in this final small room discussion in Copenhagen, it was actually the EU leaders who suggested that we needed a -80% target for industrialized countries for the mid-century. So I don't think the EU is doing all that badly. I wish some of the others would catch up in that sense. And now I don't remember the second half.
About China.
Well, China. I think China is already showing leadership. I think there's been a realization in China, probably for the past 10 years, that the current economic model will not allow China to continue an economic growth of 6, 7, 8% per year, lift people out of poverty and realize the rural to urban migration that's going to happen. So I think for purely national reasons, China has already decided to embark on a different model for economic growth. I think one of the questions in this process is, does greater legal rigor lead to greater ambition, or does legal rigor in fact work against ambition? A lot of people here talk about a legally binding treaty, and for many developing countries, what that means for them in relation to economic growth and poverty eradication goals is not clear. If I ask you, how far can you swim in 60 seconds, and if you fail to swim that far in 60 seconds, you will get a $200 penalty. You will probably say, I can maybe cover 5 meters in 60 seconds just to be on the safe side. But if I say to you that for every meter you swim more than 100 in 60 seconds, you will receive a $10 bonus. You will probably swim 200 meters in 60 seconds in order to get as much of a bonus as possible. And one of the things that worries me in this debate is that the focus on legally binding will actually lead to a lower level of ambition rather than a higher level of ambition. That's a concern.
Can I ask another question? Sure. But how can you make it respect by all the parties if it's not legally binding?
I think it's by looking much more broadly at compliance and enforcement. Let me explain what I mean. We're talking about legally binding targets. Legally binding targets is like setting a maximum speed limit on the highway. Setting a maximum speed limit on the highway only makes sense if you have policemen, radar guns, penalties and courts to enforce that maximum speed limit. And I think that there is a lot that we can do throughout the regime to make it credible. I mean, you can develop very strong rules for what you can or cannot submit for financial support through a NAMA. And you can write very strong rules on what happens if you fail to implement the NAMA project. You can write very strong rules governing red deforestation. You can write very strong rules on national communications and say that if you fail to submit your national communication in time, you will not be allowed to submit a NAMA for financing. So I think that there is a lot that we can do outside the legally binding targets to actually make a very credible regime that leads to real emission reductions.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
What are you going to be doing on the 2nd to the 6th of August?
2nd to the 6th of August, I have no idea.
Well,
Is that? Oh yeah, right.